Sometimes even the people closest to us seem completely unaware of the storms we're going through inside. And honestly, they usually are. When the ones we trust the most end up being the ones who disappoint us the deepest, it leaves us with 100 questions in our heads and a heavy weight in our chest. In those moments, we start asking ourselves, is it me? Am I the one messing up? Or maybe, am I just not enough? And that's when it gets really hard, doesn't it? Staying on your feet while everything inside you feels like it's falling apart. I've been there. Maybe you're there right now. There are days when you feel so alone, like you've lost your way in the dark. That's why I want to tell you a bit about Marcus Aurelius. Even though he lived thousands of years ago, he faced the same kind of chaos and inner battles we struggle with today. And what Marcus told us, what he lived by, is simple but deep. The challenges you face with other people don't define your strength. What really matters is how you face them, how you respond. Because sometimes the people we love the most hurt us. Sometimes we even lie to ourselves. But it's in those exact moments that the real battle begins. So today I want to share 5 powerful lessons from Marcus Aurelius about relationships. Not just abstract philosophy, but wisdom that speaks to real-life struggles. Behind each one, there's a story, a real person, a real experience. I know, relationships can be messy, confusing, and exhausting. But they're also a huge opportunity to grow, to become more of who we really are. So come with me. Let's walk this road together. Let's draw strength from Marcus's words and from the lives of those who've walked through fire and made it out stronger. Because sometimes in our darkest hours, all we really need is to hear that one sentence. The one that reminds us we're not alone and we've got more strength left than we think. First lesson, you can't control someone else's behavior. Relationships. Sometimes they're just so complicated, right? There are moments when it feels almost impossible to understand the person in front of us. No matter what we say or do, we can't seem to get the response we want. Even the people we trust and love the most can suddenly hurt us or let us down. And it's exactly in those moments that Marcus Aurelius's words hit home. You can't control someone else's behavior. What they do, what they say, how they act, that's not up to you. The only thing you truly have control over is your own mind, your thoughts, and how you respond. Once you realize this, it brings a kind of freedom, not just in relationships, but in life. Because constantly trying to change people is not only exhausting, but mostly pointless. One of the most powerful real-life examples of this lesson is the story of legendary American country singer Johnny Cash and his wife, June Carter. Their relationship shows us the raw meaning of love, patience, and acceptance. Everyone knows Johnny Cash. That deep voice, those unforgettable songs, he touched millions. But behind the spotlight, his life was far from easy. He struggled with addictions for years, alcohol and drugs. These issues affected not just his career, but every part of his personal life. He fell hard more than once and had to climb back up from rock bottom. June Carter, a respected musician in her own right, was his biggest supporter. And her real strength showed in how she stood by Johnny during his darkest times. Their relationship was far from perfect. It wasn't some fairy tale love story. It was full of struggle, pain, and repeated heartbreak. But June never tried to fix Johnny. She didn't try to control him. She accepted him as he was, with patience and with love. Many people would have walked away, and no one would have blamed them. But June chose to stay. She chose to love him through the chaos, and in doing so, she lived the very lesson Marcus Aurelius teaches. You can't control what someone else does, but you can control how you respond. One of the most touching moments in their story is when Johnny told June, "Your love saved my life." It's more than just a romantic line. It's a reminder of how powerful real love can be, especially when it stands strong in the middle of a storm. Their story teaches us that instead of trying to change the other person, we should learn to accept them and focus on our own responses. That's where real strength in a relationship comes from. It's not easy, but it is possible. This advice is especially important in romantic relationships because sometimes the people we love the most will hurt us. And yet the only thing we can truly manage is what's inside of us. If we can really get that, the weight of the conflict becomes a little easier to carry. Johnny and June's relationship was about facing reality, the mess, the flaws, the ups and downs. But it was also about staying, about holding on, about loving anyway. And that's where Marcus Aurelius's wisdom matters most. Don't get stuck on what you can't change. Just keep your own inner world strong. So now that we've embraced this first powerful truth, let's move forward. Because the next lesson is just as meaningful. In love, sometimes the deepest connection is built not by fixing someone, but simply by standing beside them and truly seeing them. Second lesson, patience and understanding are the foundation of healthy relationships. The hardest moments in a relationship often come when communication starts to break down, when misunderstandings grow and small frustrations begin to snowball. There are times when we just can't understand why the other person is acting a certain way, or we struggle to express what we're feeling ourselves. That's exactly where, as Marcus Aurelius would say, patience and understanding need to step in. Because love alone isn't enough to sustain a relationship. There must also be patience and a willingness to try and understand the other person. There's a real-life story that beautifully illustrates this. The relationship between actor Tom Hanks and his wife, Rita Wilson. They're known as one of Hollywood's most beloved couples, but their journey hasn't always been smooth. One of the most challenging times came when Rita was diagnosed with cancer, a moment that deeply affected both their lives and their relationship. Rita went through a long, difficult treatment process. It wasn't just physically exhausting, it was emotionally heavy too. Tom was by her side, but of course he couldn't fully understand what she was going through. Because being the one who's sick, facing something like cancer, is a deeply personal battle. There was a period during her chemotherapy when Rita became very weak. She felt hopeless, helpless, emotionally drained. She even had moments where she said, "I don't know how much more I can take." And during that dark time, Tom didn't pull away. He didn't try to fix everything or pretend to have the answers. He stayed with her. He supported her with quiet strength, without judgment. That choice, to stay, to be patient, became a turning point in their relationship. In his own words, Tom later said, "When I saw Rita's strength, I made it my mission to support her in any way I could." That period, as difficult as it was, made their bond even stronger. The truth is, relationships are truly tested in life's hardest moments. And in those times, love alone isn't always enough. You need patience. You need to be willing to see the world through the other person's eyes, to understand their pain, to hold back your own frustrations and simply be there. That's why Tom and Rita's story teaches us so much. Because sometimes the person you love won't have the words to explain how they feel. Sometimes what they really need is just space, quiet support, someone who doesn't rush them or push them to get better or move on, someone who just stays. And this patience and understanding isn't only for the big life crises. It's just as important in everyday moments. The small arguments, the miscommunications, the stress of daily life. It's about not letting small disappointments grow into big rifts. About not rushing to judge. About choosing to listen even when it's hard. Marcus Aurelius's lesson becomes crystal clear here. You can't control someone else's behavior, but you can always choose your own. You can choose patience. You can choose to try and understand. And most importantly, you can choose to stay rooted in love. Now that we've embraced this second important truth, it's time to move on to the third lesson, one that's all about self-awareness and growth. Because here's something we sometimes forget. A strong, healthy relationship begins with making peace within ourselves. Third lesson, focus on improving yourself. Most relationship problems start within. One of the biggest issues we run into in relationships actually begins inside us. Instead of blaming the other person or trying to fix them, the first step is looking in the mirror. Like Marcus Aurelius reminds us, owning our thoughts and emotions is the real key to staying strong in any relationship. When there's chaos inside, even being around the person we love most can feel unbearable, because it's hard to keep calm on the outside while storms rage on the inside. That's why we have to know ourselves first, recognize our own worth, and keep growing. A perfect modern example is Oprah Winfrey. Her journey has plenty of success, sure, but it's rooted in a massive inner awakening. Growing up, she faced trauma, family struggles, and serious financial hardship. Over the years, she had to face herself, tap into her own strength, and here's the turning point, make a very candid confession on live TV in 2010. She admitted she'd spent years molding herself to fit other people's expectations and, in the process, lost sight of who she really was. That moment changed everything. Once she recognized her own value, boundaries, and needs, she started seeing her relationships differently. She communicated more clearly and set healthier expectations. Where she once felt drained and never enough, she learned to speak her mind and draw a line. The result? Fewer disappointments, because she stopped measuring her worth by someone else's behavior and protected her inner peace instead. This is exactly what Marcus Aurelius means when he says mastering our thoughts is more important than mastering external events. If we can't manage ourselves, we keep getting hurt in our relationships. But once we find balance inside, we show up stronger and kinder on the outside. Oprah's story makes one thing crystal clear. Solid relationships start with being at peace with ourselves. That means knowing our feelings, respecting our limits, and practicing true maturity, not just confidence. Of course, that journey isn't easy. Oprah freely admits how painful and messy it was. Facing buried emotions, owning mistakes, stripping away old masks. It takes courage. Yet on the other side of that work lies inner calm and genuine happiness in our relationships. Now that we've got this third lesson down, let's move to the fourth. How to stay loving when times get truly tough. Because no relationship is ever problem-free, what matters is how we handle the rough patches. Fourth lesson. Don't get swept away by temporary emotions. Use your reason. Some relationships from the outside look like they're built only on power, ambition, or politics. But once you look closer, you realize there's a whole different world behind those walls. That's exactly what Eleanor and Franklin D. Roosevelt's relationship was like. They weren't just the president and first lady. They were two people who endured pain, distance, and ultimately acceptance. They met through relatives when they were both young. Eleanor was quiet, shy, and didn't grow up with much affection. Franklin was the opposite, confident, charming, and self-assured. At first, their differences balanced each other out. Franklin's confidence made Eleanor feel safe, while Eleanor's depth brought something grounding to Franklin's world. But as time passed, their fairy tale faded. Franklin's political career took off, and their lives became more demanding. Eleanor didn't want to just be the quiet woman standing behind the powerful man. She had her own dreams, fighting for women's rights, human rights, and real change. That didn't exactly fit into the image of the traditional supportive wife. The turning point came in 1918 when Eleanor discovered Franklin's affair with his secretary, Lucy Mercer. It broke her. To her, marriage wasn't just about building a life together. It meant emotional loyalty, too. For a long time, she went silent. But this wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of something new. Eleanor considered divorce, but after long talks with family and weighing the societal and political consequences, she chose to stay. What mattered was this. She decided to live no longer as just the president's wife, but as her own person. That moment changed everything. She became Franklin's political partner, not just his spouse. She helped with his public image, yes, but she also followed her own path. From women's rights to civil rights and education reform, she made her voice heard. Franklin didn't resist her transformation. He accepted her. And that's the most mature kind of love. Standing by someone not because they fit your mold, but because you respect their path. When Franklin was later paralyzed by polio, their roles reversed. Eleanor carried the weight, not just of their home, but of public responsibility. At one point, Franklin told her, "You have more power than I do. You can walk. I can only rely on you now." That one line captured their bond. She wasn't just a supportive wife. She kept him going mentally and emotionally. They were no longer just a romantic couple. They had become two pillars leaning on each other. If one fell, the other would too. From the outside, their relationship may have looked distant or complicated, but inside it held deep trust, acceptance, and commitment. Eleanor wasn't just Franklin's partner. She was his closest confidant, his strongest critic, and his greatest support. And while he didn't always show emotion, he depended on her until the very end. Their story reminds us that real relationships go far beyond romance. Sometimes it's not about chasing a dream together, but about choosing to stay in the same boat when the storm hits. That's why Eleanor and Franklin Roosevelt's relationship isn't a love story. It's a story of resilience. And it tells us something powerful. You don't need to be perfect. Sometimes just choosing to stay and keep fighting is enough. Relationships aren't only about understanding each other. The person in front of you becomes a mirror, reflecting who you really are. The conflicts, the admiration, even the silence. They all teach you something about yourself. And that brings us to the fifth lesson. Because every relationship in the end is a mirror. What it shows you might just change your life. Lesson 5. Every relationship is a mirror. It shows you what you need to learn. Some people come into our lives and feel like coincidence. But over time, we realize their arrival wasn't random at all. They came to shine a light on something missing, something wounded, or something hidden deep within us. Relationships, especially when we're forced to face ourselves, become some of life's greatest teachers. One of the clearest examples of this is Carl Jung. Carl Jung was one of the most profound thinkers in modern psychology. He introduced the concept of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we suppress, reject, or simply don't want to face. According to Jung, people avoid confronting their shadow directly, but life finds ways to show it to them, most often through relationships. Sometimes the anger we feel towards someone is just the pain of recognizing a side of ourselves we don't want to accept. Sometimes being abandoned forces us to confront the loneliness we carry inside. Jung's own life reflected this. In 1907, he met Freud, and they quickly formed a deep friendship and intellectual partnership. Freud even saw Jung as his successor. But after a few years, their philosophical differences became impossible to ignore. Freud insisted everything could be traced back to sexuality, while Jung believed the human psyche was far more complex and spiritual. By 1913, their relationship ended completely. And with that, not only did a professional partnership break apart, but a deep personal bond too. This separation sent Jung into a kind of existential crisis. He turned inward and entered a strange, symbolic, and deeply emotional phase of life. Some have called it a period of near madness, but for Jung it was a necessary part of discovering who he really was. The break with Freud didn't just push him to develop his own theories, it forced him to confront his own identity, values, and inner world. That pain became the fuel for transformation. What's striking is that their falling out wasn't just about ideas, it pushed Jung into a deep inner reckoning. The conflict brought his shadow to the surface, his fears, suppressed traits, and internal contradictions. Through this painful journey, Jung emerged not just as a new kind of psychologist, but as a changed person. The truth is, every relationship acts as a mirror, not just romantic ones. Even the tough, messy, and painful connections are there to teach us something about ourselves. As Jung put it, "He who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakens." This lesson is clear. Every relationship is a teacher. Someone's laughter may teach you what love feels like. Their absence might teach you resilience. And sometimes the end of a relationship is what finally introduces you to yourself. So before you blame or resent someone, pause and ask, what is this person showing me about me? Why am I going through this experience right now? If you can start to look at your relationships this way, you stop being a victim. You become a student. You grow, you gain awareness, and you move forward not by blaming, but by understanding. And maybe most importantly, you stop expecting others to complete you. Instead, you begin to love people for what they reveal about you. In the chaos of life, our relationships often become our greatest tests. They challenge us, sometimes they hurt us, but they always help us grow and mature. The teachings of Marcus Aurelius still shine like a guiding light, even thousands of years later. To move forward with patience, empathy, inner peace, and a willingness to truly understand one another. That is the very essence of life. Let's not forget, every person is fighting their own inner battle, often quietly, often unseen. And in the battlefield of life, relationships are about standing side by side through it all. Misunderstandings, disappointments, hard times, they'll come. But what matters most is choosing to hold on to each other through the storm. As Marcus Aurelius said, it's not about what we can't control. It's about choosing our attitude in the face of it. Every experience we live through makes us stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. That inner maturity begins to shape the way we love. We stop trying to change the other person and instead learn to accept them as they are. We recognize our own shadows, we make peace with them. And in that space, love becomes more than a feeling. It becomes a deep, steady force woven into every part of our life. In relationships, we stumble, we get lost, but we can always begin again. We can give ourselves and those we love a second chance, or a third. One of the most beautiful things about being human is that we're allowed to fall, and we're just as capable of rising again, stronger. If you're on that journey now, here's what you need to remember. You're not alone. Everyone feels these complex emotions. Everyone struggles sometimes. What matters is that you keep going, that you move forward with courage and believe in the healing power of love. Let's end with the words of Marcus Aurelius. Difficulties are what shape strong souls. And you, yes, you carry that strength inside you. Let your relationships become your greatest teachers. Because hearts that grow with love will always shine, even in the darkest of days. Thank you for watching.